Willow Creek Park is Mia Carter's sanctuary, a place where she feels closest to her father, Detective Ethan Carter, and safe in a world that often feels chaotic. But on one quiet Saturday, her peace is shattered when a chance encounter with Officer Brent Sloan takes a dark and unexpected turn. What begins as an unsettling confrontation escalates into a harrowing ordeal that leaves Mia terrified, humiliated, and questioning everything she thought she knew about safety and trust. When her father arrives in the nick of time, Ethan's protective instincts kick in, but the fallout of Sloan's arrest sets off a chain reaction neither of them could have foreseen. As the media descends and public outrage grows, Mia becomes the unwitting face of a fight against corruption, while Ethan uncovers a conspiracy that reaches far deeper than a single rogue officer. The shadows in the park hide secrets that could destroy them both. Can Mia and Ethan confront the forces threatening their family and community, or will the darkness claim them for good? The morning sun poured through the windows as Mia Carter slipped on her sneakers. Saturdays at Willow Creek Park were her favorite, and today she planned to surprise her dad, Detective Ethan Carter, during his patrol. The park was their place, a sanctuary amidst the city bustle. "Mia, don't forget your water bottle," her mom called from the kitchen. "I won't." Mia grabbed it, stuffing it into her backpack alongside a small sketch pad. Her dad had promised to teach her sketching one day, but for now, she enjoyed doodling the trees and trails. The air smelled of fresh grass as she entered the park. Families picnicked, kids chased frisbees, and couples strolled hand in hand. Mia smiled. This was home in a way nothing else was. Her dad's dedication to this place made her proud. Mia wandered deeper into the park, where the noise faded, replaced by the soft rustle of leaves and birdsong. The winding trail was one she and her dad had walked countless times. She hoped to catch a glimpse of him, imagining his face lighting up when he saw her. She rounded a bend and froze. A stocky officer stood near a bench, his posture stiff. His uniform fit poorly, the edges of his shirt untucked. Mia's heart skipped. She didn't recognize him. Most of the officers here were familiar faces, always friendly. "Should I say hi?" she wondered, taking a hesitant step forward. The officer's eyes locked on her, cold and calculating. A shiver ran down her spine. "Hey, you," the officer barked, his voice gruff. Mia stopped, unsure how to respond. Hi," she said cautiously. "Where do you think you're going?" he demanded, stepping into her path. "I'm just walking," Mia said, her voice small. "I'm here to see my dad. He's on duty." The officer's eyes narrowed. "Oh yeah? Who's your dad?" "Detective Carter," Mia replied, hoping the name would ease the tension. Instead, his sneer deepened. "Detective Carter's kid? Huh? Figures. You think you can just wander around like you own the place?" "No, Mia's words faltered. She tried to step around him, but he blocked her again. The officer's tone grew sharper. "Kids like you think you're untouchable because of your daddy's badge. I'm not doing anything wrong," Mia said, her voice trembling. "Don't lie to me," he growled, grabbing her arm. She flinched, trying to pull away, but his grip tightened. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a can of beer, holding it in front of her face. "Drink." "What?" Mia recoiled, horrified. "No, drink," he snarled, shoving the can toward her. Tears welled in her eyes as fear took hold. She twisted, trying to free herself, but he was too strong. The sharp metal of the can pressed against her lips. "Let her go." A booming voice cut through the air. Mia's heart leapt as her dad appeared, his face a mix of fury and panic. "Ethan," she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. Detective Carter stormed toward them, his hand on his radio. "What the hell do you think you're doing, Sloan?" Sloan released Mia, but not before smirking. "Just teaching her some respect, Detective." Ethan's fists clenched. "Step back. Now." Sloan hesitated before taking a step away. Ethan pulled Mia into his arms, murmuring, "It's okay, baby. I'm here now." Mia sobbed into his chest as he glared at Sloan. "You're done. Backup is on the way." Sloan shrugged, his smirk intact. "We'll see about that." Ethan's jaw tightened as he held Mia close. He would make sure this wasn't the end of it. "Step away from my daughter," Ethan growled, his voice cutting through the stillness like a blade. Sloane smirked, his stance defiant. "I was just having a chat with the kid, Carter. Don't get all high and mighty." Ethan's fists clenched. "A chat? Is that what you call grabbing a 13-year-old and forcing her to?" He stopped himself, taking a deep breath to keep from losing control. "You're done, Sloane. Backup's on the way. Don't move." Mia clung to her father's arm, her hands trembling. "Dad, It's okay, Mia," Ethan murmured, his voice softening as he turned to her. "You're safe now." Sloane scoffed. "Safe? Oh, come on, Carter. Don't act like I'm some monster. Maybe if you didn't spoil her, she wouldn't." "Enough." Ethan's voice rose sharply. "One more word and you'll regret it." Sloane raised his hands mockingly. "Fine. I'll wait for your little squad to arrive. But let's not pretend this is more than a misunderstanding." Ethan's radio crackled. "Unit 3 en route. ETA 2 minutes. "Good," Ethan muttered. He turned back to Mia, his eyes scanning her face for any signs of injury. "Did he hurt you?" Mia shook her head but couldn't speak. The tears in her eyes spoke volumes. 2 patrol officers arrived quickly, their expressions shifting from confusion to concern as they approached the scene. "Detective Carter," one officer said. "What's going on here?" "Sloane assaulted my daughter," Ethan said flatly. "Take him in. I'll file the report myself." "Assault," Sloane said with a laugh. "You're really going to blow this out of proportion, Carter?" The younger officer stepped forward. "Sir, we'll need to escort you to the precinct." "You're serious?" Sloane's tone shifted, a hint of uncertainty creeping in. "Serious enough to make sure you face the consequences," Ethan said, his voice cold. "And if you think this ends here, you're wrong." As the officers led Sloane away, Ethan knelt down to Mia's level. "Mia, honey, look at me." She sniffled, her voice trembling. "I was so scared, Dad." Ethan's heart broke at her words. "I know, sweetie. I'm so sorry I wasn't there sooner. But I promise you, he won't hurt anyone else." The precinct was a whirlwind of motion. Officers whispered as Sloane was processed, their shock palpable. Ethan sat with Mia in a small office, trying to keep her calm. A senior officer, Captain Angela Reyes, entered the room. "Carter," she said, her tone a mix of concern and authority. "I've read the preliminary report. Is it true Sloane targeted Mia?" Ethan nodded. He did, and it wasn't random. He knew who she was. Reyes sighed, pinching the bridge of her nose. "This isn't just about one officer's misconduct. If there's more to this..." "There is," Ethan interrupted. "I'll dig into it, but right now, I need to make sure Mia's okay." Reyes softened. "Of course. Take her home. We'll handle Sloane for now." Ethan stood, guiding Mia out of the precinct. But as they left, he couldn't ignore the stares and whispers that followed them. By the next morning, news of Sloane's arrest had spread. Local media ran headlines like, "Officer accused of assaulting detective's daughter." Ethan's phone buzzed incessantly with calls from reporters and concerned friends. Mia sat on the couch, clutching a blanket as her mother, Sarah, tried to comfort her. "I don't want to talk to anyone," Mia whispered. "You don't have to, sweetheart," Sarah said gently, brushing Mia's hair back. "We'll handle this." Ethan paced the room, his jaw tight. "This isn't just about us anymore. People are asking questions about the department. They're wondering how someone like Sloane was hired in the first place." Sarah glanced at him. "Do you think it'll lead back to Marcus Gray?" Ethan's expression darkened. "I don't know. But if it does, we need to be ready." That evening, Ethan sat beside Mia in her room. She was drawing quietly, her hands steadying as the minutes passed. "Mia," he said softly. She looked up, her eyes tired. "Yeah, Dad. I need you to know something," he began. "What happened to you? It's not your fault. And I'm going to do everything I can to make sure Sloane and anyone connected to him pays for this." Mia hesitated. What if it doesn't change anything?" Ethan reached out, holding her hand. "It will. Because we're not going to let this go. And you're stronger than you realize, Mia." She nodded, a small spark of determination in her eyes. "Okay, Dad." As Ethan left the room, his resolve hardened. Sloane's arrest was just the beginning. He would uncover the truth, no matter where it led. Ethan sat at his desk, the precinct buzzing with its usual energy. His mind, however, was anything but calm. The events at Willow Creek Park weighed heavily on him. He needed answers. Leaning forward, he tapped his pen on the desk, eyes scanning Sloane's personnel file. "Hey, Carter," a familiar voice called. It was Officer Daniels, a friend and colleague Ethan trusted. "Heard about what happened with your daughter. You okay?" Ethan sighed. "Not really. And I don't think Sloane acted alone." Daniels raised an eyebrow. "What makes you say that?" "I've been piecing things together," Ethan said, lowering his voice. Sloane wasn't just some rogue cop having a bad day. He knew who Mia was. It felt calculated. Daniels hesitated. "Carter, if you're suggesting this runs deeper, you might be stepping into dangerous territory." "That's a risk I'll take," Ethan said firmly. "This is about my daughter. And if there's more to this, I won't stop until I find out." Meanwhile, at home, Mia sat in her room, staring at her untouched sketchpad. The trauma of what had happened in the park clung to her like a shadow. She flinched at the sound of footsteps in the hallway. Her mom, Sarah, knocked gently before stepping inside. "Mia, honey, how are you holding up?" "I'm fine," Mia lied, her voice barely audible. Sarah sat beside her. "You don't have to be fine. What happened was awful, and it's okay to feel scared or angry." Tears welled up in Mia's eyes. "I feel broken. I don't want to go outside. I don't want to see anyone." Sarah wrapped an arm around her. "You're not broken, sweetie. What you went through was horrible, but you're stronger than you know. And your dad and I are here for you, no matter what." Mia nodded, leaning into her mother's embrace. "I just want it to go away." "We'll get through this together," Sarah whispered, "one step at a time." The next morning, Ethan and Mia sat in a sterile conference room at the Internal Affairs headquarters. Detective Ramirez, a sharp-eyed woman with a calm demeanor, sat across from them. "Thank you for coming in, Detective Carter." "Mia," Ramirez said, "we know this isn't easy, but your account is crucial to our investigation." Ethan nodded. "We're ready." Ramirez turned to Mia, her tone softening. "Mia, can you tell me what happened that day in the park?" "Take your time." Mia hesitated, glancing at her father. He gave her a reassuring nod. Taking a deep breath, she recounted the events. Sloane's hostility, his words, and the beer can. Her voice shook, but she pushed through, determined to be heard. When she finished, Ramirez's expression was grim. "Mia, you were incredibly brave to share this. We'll do everything we can to hold him accountable." Ethan leaned forward. "I want to know if there's a connection between Sloane and Marcus Gray." Ramirez's eyebrows lifted. "Gray? The former detective?" "Yes," Ethan said. "If Sloane's actions were part of a larger plan, we need to know." "We'll look into it," Ramirez assured him. "But tread carefully, Carter. If you're right, this could get messy." Ethan's suspicions deepened later that day as he combed through old case files in his office. The name Marcus Gray appeared again and again. A pattern of corruption, intimidation, and manipulation. His phone buzzed. It was Daniels. "Carter, you were right," Daniels said. "I did some digging. Turns out Sloane and Gray had connections before Sloane transferred to our precinct. They worked together on a private security gig." Ethan's grip on the phone tightened. This wasn't random. "Gray's behind this. What's the plan?" Daniels asked. "I'm not sure yet," Ethan admitted. "But if Gray's pulling strings, I'll find out. He won't get away with this." As he hung up, a wave of unease washed over him. This wasn't just about Sloane anymore. The web was larger and far more dangerous than he'd anticipated. At the community center that evening, a group of neighbors gathered to discuss what had happened. Ethan brought Mia, unsure if she'd want to speak, but hoping she'd feel supported. The room buzzed with conversation until a local pastor stood to address the crowd. "We're here tonight because what happened to Mia Carter was wrong. But it's part of a larger issue we can no longer ignore. Abuse of power within the system meant to protect us." Mia sat quietly, listening. Her father leaned down. "You don't have to say anything, but if you want to, I'll be right here." After a moment, Mia stood. The room fell silent as she approached the podium. "My name is Mia Carter," she began. her voice steady despite the nerves. "I didn't ask for this to happen to me, but it did. And now, I just want to make sure it doesn't happen to anyone else." The crowd erupted in applause, their support washing over her like a wave. For the first time since the incident, Mia felt a glimmer of strength returning. Ethan watched with pride, his resolve solidifying. They weren't just fighting for justice, they were fighting for change. Ethan sat in his dimly lit office, a stack of files scattered across his desk. His eyes narrowed as he scanned another report linking Marcus Gray to misconduct within the department. Each piece of evidence painted a clearer picture. Gray wasn't just orchestrating a vendetta against him. He was building a network of corrupt officers. "Gray's been pulling strings for years," Ethan muttered, running a hand through his hair. Daniels knocked softly on the door before entering. "Carter, you look like you've been at this all night. What did you find?" Ethan slid a folder across the desk. "Proof that Gray has ties to Sloan. And it's not just them. Look at this." Daniels flipped through the papers, his expression darkening. "This goes deeper than I thought. If Gray's pulling the strings, we're going to need more than suspicion to take him down." Ethan nodded. "I know. That's why we have to be careful. He's not going to go down without a fight." At the community center, the crowd gathered again, buzzing with energy. Mia stood near the back, her palms sweating as she clutched her prepared speech. Her father's encouragement echoed in her mind. "You're stronger than you know, Mia." A local activist introduced her, and the room erupted in applause. Mia stepped forward, her heart pounding but her resolve firm. "My name is Mia Carter," she began, her voice steady. "A few weeks ago, I was just a kid who loved going to the park. But everything changed when I met someone who used their power to hurt me." She paused, scanning the crowd. "What happened to me wasn't just about one bad officer. It's about a system that lets people like him get away with it. That has to change." The audience erupted in cheers. Reporters scribbled notes, cameras flashed, and Mia felt a sense of pride she hadn't experienced since the incident. As she stepped down, Ethan greeted her with a warm hug. "You were incredible," he said softly. Mia smiled. "I just said what needed to be said." Later that night, Ethan's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Back off, Carter, or you'll regret it." He stared at the message, his jaw tightening. A second text followed. "Think about your family." Ethan immediately called Daniels. "I just got a threat. They're trying to intimidate me." "Gray's trying to protect his operation," Daniels said. "We need to get this to internal affairs." Ethan hesitated, glancing at Mia's bedroom door. She was finally starting to heal. "No, not yet. I need more evidence before we take this to IA." "Just be careful," Daniels warned. "Gray won't stop until he gets what he wants." "I won't let him win," Ethan said firmly. Determined to confront Gray, Ethan arranged a meeting at a neutral location, a deserted diner late at night. Gray arrived, his slicked-back hair glinting under the fluorescent lights. "You've been busy, Carter," Gray said, sliding into the booth across from him. Ethan didn't mince words. "You've crossed the line, Gray. Targeting my daughter? That's low, even for you." Gray smirked. "Don't play the martyr. You think exposing me years ago didn't have consequences? You took everything from me." Ethan leaned forward, his voice cold. "You did that to yourself. I won't let you drag this department down any further." Gray's smirk faded. "You're in over your head. Back off, Carter, or your family won't be safe." Ethan's fists clenched, but he kept his voice steady. "You can threaten me all you want, but I'll take you down. And when I do, you'll finally pay for what you've done." Gray stood, his gaze icy. "We'll see who wins this game." Ethan returned home to find Mia and Sarah waiting for him in the living room. The tension in his posture didn't go unnoticed. "What happened?" Sarah asked, concern etched on her face. Ethan hesitated before sitting down. "It's Gray. He's behind everything. Sloan, the threats, all of it. And he's not going to stop until he gets what he wants." Mia's eyes widened. "He's coming after us?" Ethan reached for her hand. "Not if I can help it, but I need you both to be careful. This isn't just about us anymore. It's about exposing the truth." Sarah nodded, her jaw set with determination. "We're with you, Ethan, whatever it takes. Mia squeezed his hand. We can't let him win, Dad. We have to fight back. Ethan's heart swelled with pride. We will. Together. Ethan sat in his office, staring at the folder on his desk. Inside was everything he had gathered, names, dates, and evidence tying Marcus Gray to a network of corrupt officers. He knew this wasn't enough to win a case outright, but it was enough to force the department's hand. Picking up his phone, he called an old friend, investigative journalist Lauren Price. Lauren, it's Ethan. Carter? It's been years. What's going on? I have a story for you. A big one, but it's risky. Are you in? Lauren chuckled softly. You've piqued my interest. Send me what you've got, and let's talk. Hours later, her article broke online, detailing the corruption within the department and hinting at Gray's involvement. It was vague enough to protect Ethan, but detailed enough to spark outrage. Social media erupted, and by the next morning, the story had reached national news. Mia scrolled through her phone at the breakfast table. Dad, this is everywhere. People are already demanding answers. Ethan nodded. This is just the start. Gray's going to slip up now. He won't be able to stay in the shadows much longer. At the precinct, the tension was palpable. Internal Affairs was working overtime, questioning officers and reviewing cases. Ethan found himself called into Captain Rhea's office. She leaned back in her chair, her expression unreadable. Carter, you're at the center of this storm. Care to explain? I exposed corruption, Captain. If Gray or anyone else in this department is complicit, they need to be held accountable. Rhea sighed. You've put the department under a microscope. If you're wrong, this could blow up in all our faces. I'm not wrong, Ethan said firmly. And you'll see that soon enough. Reyes nodded slowly. Fine, but you'd better be ready for what comes next. Later that day, Internal Affairs announced formal charges against Sloan. Rumors swirled that Gray was being investigated, but no official word was released. Ethan could feel the walls closing in on Gray, but he knew it wasn't over yet. Ethan parked his car outside a diner late at night. He hadn't been there long when a black sedan pulled up. Marcus Gray stepped out, his silver hair glinting under the streetlights. Gray slid into the booth across from Ethan, his smile as cold as ever. You've been busy, Carter. Busy doing what you should have done years ago, Ethan replied. Gray's eyes narrowed. You think this ends with me? You think taking me down will fix anything? You're naive. This isn't just about fixing the department, Ethan said. It's about justice. For Mia, for every victim of your schemes. Gray leaned forward, his voice low. You've made a lot of enemies, Carter. Do you really want to make things worse for your family? Ethan's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice steady. This is bigger than threats. And I'm not backing down. Gray smirked, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of uncertainty. We'll see. The next morning, Ethan stood in the precinct, watching as Internal Affairs agents escorted Marcus Gray out in handcuffs. The former detective tried to maintain his composure, but his face was pale, his confident smirk replaced with fear. Officers and staff gathered, some whispering in shock, others nodding in approval. Ethan felt a mix of relief and exhaustion. It was over, at least for now. Mia and Sarah met him at home later that evening. They embraced tightly, the weight of the last few weeks finally lifting. Is it really over? Mia asked softly. For Gray, yes, Ethan said. But there's still work to be done. We have to make sure the department changes for the better. Mia nodded. Then let's do it. Weeks later, the department announced new reforms, including stricter oversight and mandatory sensitivity training. Mia was invited to join a community advisory board, a role she embraced with determination. At the board's first meeting, she stood before a room of activists, officers, and city officials. What happened to me shouldn't happen to anyone else. We need to hold people accountable and make sure the system works for everyone. Her words were met with applause, and Ethan watched with pride as his daughter found her voice. That evening, the family returned to Willow Creek Park. The trails were quiet, the air crisp with the promise of a new season. Mia hesitated at first but smiled as she walked beside her father. This place feels different now, she said. It's still our park, Ethan replied. And it always will be. As they strolled through the familiar paths, father and daughter shared a sense of hope. They had faced darkness together and emerged stronger, united by their love and their fight for justice. The town hall was packed, the energy in the room electric. Rows of chairs were filled with community members, city officials, and activists who had supported the movement sparked by Mia's courage. Banners with phrases like "Justice for all" and "Accountability now" lined the walls. Ethan stood in the back, watching as Mia adjusted the microphone on the stage. She was poised, confident, and glowing with a sense of purpose that made him swell with pride. "Today," Mia began, her voice clear and strong, "is about more than what happened to me. It's about the changes we've made together. Because no one should feel powerless in their own community." The audience erupted in applause, and Ethan found himself clapping harder than anyone. After the speeches concluded, Ethan and Mia were presented with plaques honoring their contributions to justice and reform. As they posed for photos, Mia leaned toward her dad and whispered, "We did it." "No, you did it," Ethan replied, his voice filled with emotion. That night, Ethan sat alone in his office, the dim light of his desk lamp casting shadows across a stack of files. He stared at the photo of Mia receiving her plaque, a smile tugging at his lips. The events of the past few months had been grueling. Ethan had been forced to confront not just the corruption within his department, but his own fears and failures as a father. Yet here they were, stronger and more united than ever. Sarah appeared in the doorway, holding 2 mugs of coffee. "Penny, for your thoughts?" Ethan gestured for her to sit. "I was just thinking about how far we've come, and how much further we still have to go." Sarah handed him a mug. "You've done more than most would. You should be proud." "I am," he admitted. "But this isn't the end. It's just the beginning." A week later, Mia stood at another podium, this time in front of her classmates at school. The assembly had been called to address issues of bullying and empowerment, and Mia had been invited to share her story. "I used to think my voice didn't matter," Mia began, glancing at the rows of students watching her. "But I've learned that speaking up, even when it's scary, can make a difference. We all have the power to create change, no matter how small we feel." Her words were met with applause, but it was the quiet nods and whispered thanks afterward that stuck with her. Fellow students approached her, sharing their own fears and struggles, and Mia realized just how far her courage had reached. That evening, the Carters gathered in the living room. Sarah brought out a tray of cookies, and Mia curled up on the couch with a book. Ethan joined them, carrying a box of old photo albums. "Thought we could take a trip down memory lane," he said, setting the box down. As they flipped through pictures of family outings, holidays, and silly moments, the room filled with laughter. For the first time in months, the weight of recent events seemed to lift. "You were such a troublemaker, Dad," Mia teased, pointing to a photo of Ethan with a goofy grin and a bad haircut. "Guilty as charged," Ethan admitted with a chuckle. "But I turned out okay. And so did we," Sarah added, pulling them both into a warm embrace. The next morning, Ethan and Mia returned to Willow Creek Park. The trails were quiet, the air crisp with the promise of a new beginning. Mia hesitated as they approached the spot where her encounter with Sloane had occurred. "You okay?" Ethan asked, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. Mia nodded, taking a deep breath. "Yeah, I think I am." Together, they walked the path, reclaiming it step by step. The trees whispered in the breeze, and the sunlight danced on the leaves, as if the park itself were welcoming them back. As they reached the lake, Mia turned to her father. "This place feels different now." "It's still ours," Ethan said. "No one can take that from us." Mia smiled, her confidence renewed. "Let's keep it that way." Ethan nodded. Always. The Carters' journey wasn't just about exposing corruption or seeking justice. It was about finding strength in each other, healing from trauma, and inspiring change in their community. As they walked through the park together, their steps were light, their hearts full. The darkness that had once overshadowed their lives was fading, replaced by a bright and hopeful future. This was just the beginning of their legacy. Together, they were unstoppable.